To the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Staltari, and I am a genealogist, and as many of you know, a passionate traveler. I want to thank you for coming and visiting us on episode 251 of Les Filles du Roi. I can't believe we're here already. And over the last several years, I have been focusing my attention on Les Filles du Roi. There are about 700 of them. We're going to do them all eventually. So I'm just taking one at a time and really trying to get to know their stories. And their stories are incredible. So, and then I started Les Filles Mariées. Again, there are only about 262 of those. But again, their stories are remarkable. Each and every one of them contributes to the tapestry that is and was Quebec. So before we get started, let me show you ways you can support the channel. The first three keep you in the know. Subscribe, like, and notify. The next three are ways to help the channel grow. Coffee, Patreon, and the PayPal button that you can find on my Have Roots Will Travel website. Oh, and there's also a super thanks that YouTube does as well that you can click on when you're on the screen. You can see it on the bottom. And all of those are ways to help the channel grow. And I want to thank all of you who have done so thus far. Really, really appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much. And let's get started and get to know our episode 251 of this episode. Today's episode is on Les Filles du Roi, episode 251. Her name, Suzanne Durand. Now, she comes to me from a viewer request, and she is also the great-grandmother of Madonna. And then I have a fellow genealogy volunteer who also, this is her great-grandma as well. So let's explore the world of Suzanne. Suzanne was born in 1653 in a town called Montivilliers in France. Now, you can see by the map that she is from the Normandy region, and her département is Seine-Maritime. There are currently 15,000 people who live in this city. Actually, it's a city. And this town owes its prosperity and fame to the prestigious Women's Abbey, an original creation among many of the male abbeys in Normandy. Supported by the Norman lords and then by the kings of France, the abscesses of the Abbey of Montivilliers encouraged very early the installation of dwellings nearby and the development of trade and industry. The village developed to become a commune in 1202 under the name of Montivilliers. Trade and the establishment of tanneries led to a flourishing trade. And it with the cities of Champagne and Flanders. The Hundred Years' War began a commercial decline that accelerated with the foundation of the port of Havre-du-Grace in 1516 and the transfer of commercial activities to that new town. From its medieval splendor, the town of Montivilliers preserves a very rich and religious civil architecture heritage. The church that she would have been baptized, this was a contemporary of William the Conqueror. The Abbey Church is a marvel of Norman, Roman, and Gothic architecture. It was built in the 11th century for the Abbey, and it was modified in the 15th. And then very surprising church with two naves allowing parishioners and nuns to live together. And this town obviously dates back to probably about 684, although it was destroyed by a Viking raid in 850. So, I mean, just the historical. To walk there would mean that you really walk in history. So Suzanne would come to New France on the Saint-Louis de Dieppe. On September 25th, 1667 is when she would arrive. She was about 14 years of age, very, very young. She selected, and who selected her? His name was Gabriel Guibault de Poitevin, and he was born in 1641 in a town called Lusignan, France. His parents were Pierre Guibault and René Lorlière. Now, remember that this is part of the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region. And inside that region, we have the Département de Vienne. We don't go there that often. And this town of Lusignan, which now has about 3,000 inhabitants, it has a very, as you can see, all of France has many times this sort of incredible history. It's about 400 kilometers from Paris, and the between the 10th and the 14th centuries, the history of this town overlaps with that of the House of Lusignan. So if you study this town, if this is your ancestry, you need to explore that. During the 16th century, this town was repeatedly involved in the French wars of religion between the Huguenots and the Catholics. The city walls, it had these amazing, were dismantled by royal orders in the 17th century. So you can see on the right, the very picturesque, very old kind of roads that existed, and this is the church at Lusignan that he would have been baptized at, dating from about the 11th century. Gabriel would come to New France, presumably around 1664. He was a miller and would be an engagé, as they called it, a contract. He would have signed a work contract to work for 3 years and potentially stay on. So they were married at Quebec City on the 30th of October, 1667. And this is the town that they settled in. Beautiful, La Belleterie. Let's explore it a little bit. So I wanted to explore this town's history, and it became so complicated and convoluted that I designed this PowerPoint slide just to explain it. So we have 1672, Jean Talon gives this land to Lieutenant Séraphin Margan, Sœur de La Belleterie, in 1672, who had fought with the Gagne regiment. In 1699, Pierre-Paul Margan, his son, the first, inherits the seigneurie. He is also a career soldier and would have fought on the plains of Abraham for the French. Just amazing. 1766, Pierre-Paul Margan II would ultimately expand the territory to include the township of Kildare. He would also be elected to the very first Parliament of Lower Canada, in 1792. Pierre-Paul's daughter, Suzanne Antoinette, marries Charles Gaspard Thériault de Lanaudière and acquires the seigneurie. Now, this seigneurie would now become part of the Lanaudière family, and their daughter, Charlotte Thériault de Lanaudière, one of their three daughters, would marry Barthélemy Joliet, who would go on to become the founder of the town of Joliet. I mean, it's just incredible, the legacy of this one little town. And it's just like the soap opera that is Quebec. And then they marry this one and that one. And so really and truly, the La Belleterie has a very, very, as you can see, rich history. They would go on to have 9 children. Jean-Baptiste married Anne Faviot and had 10 children, all of whom made it to adulthood. Anne's mother was Anne Michel, a fille du roi who we have not yet profiled. Marie-Madeleine would die at the age of 28, and we'll be exploring her life in a second. Suzanne, Jeanne, Séraphin, all would die after the 1681 census. Angélique would marry Jacques Labelle and have 6 children, all of whom made it to adulthood. Pierre would die in infancy. Gabrielle would marry Isabelle Messager and have 2 children, both of whom made it to adulthood. And Etienne would marry Elisabeth Austin and have 3 children, all of whom would make it to adulthood. In the 1681 census, we have Gabrielle and Suzanne, and their children, Jean, we have Madeleine, we have Suzanne, we have Jeanne, we have Séraphin, we have Pierre and Gabrielle. You can see that they are listed as twins. This is not very usual, so it's an unusual situation to see the twins, and unfortunately Pierre did not make it. They have 1 gun, they have 4 bêtes à cornes, which, as you know, I've recently discovered that it's not just goats, that it can be any horned animal, so you can determine what they would have needed. And then we have 12 arpents valaires, which is about 9 to 10 acres of land. Her daughter Marie-Madeleine was found guilty of hiding a pregnancy and of allowing the child to die unattended. On October 7th, 1697, she was hanged at Quebec City. I can't even imagine the pain that they would have suffered watching this, and the shame as well. And again, when we're looking backwards in history, figuring out why someone did what they did, it may seem heinous or it may have been forced upon her. We have no way of knowing. And unfortunately, Marie-Madeleine would be hung. And we are, obviously it's a tragic loss for Suzanne and her husband. Gagne would die in 1700 at age 59. Think about that. Only 3 years after his daughter was hung. The coincidence of that. Yes, they died young back then, but when I saw that, I was like, oh, maybe he died of a broken heart. He and Suzanne would have been married 33 years. Suzanne would die presumably at Leipzig sometime after 1710. We don't have a death record for her, but that is the last time she appears in any kind of documents, and that's kind of where at this, either she was listed as a godmother or in the marriage of one of her children, that sort of thing, is how we kind of figure out, how they figure out, okay, probably after 1710. As of 1729, they would leave us with 86 descendants, of which Madonna and our viewer are part of that legacy. So despite the hardships, they definitely managed to make certain that their legacy lived on. These, as always, I always like to refer you back to some of my favorite resources that I use consistently, and listed them all the links are there as well. One of the ones I want to feature today is Genealogie Quebec, which is really and truly the ancestry of Quebec. You really, if you're doing hardcore genealogical research, you really need that website. At least get it for a month and really work it if that's what you need to do, because it really is worth it. So have a look at Genealogie Quebec and discover more about your family tree than you could possibly imagine. And so we end our story of Suzanne Durand. I mean, what a story. I mean, to lose your daughter and in such a horrible way. And then to also, don't forget, she lost 4 children in all. And, it's just tremendous loss. And then, toward the end of her life, to lose her husband so quickly after the loss of her grown daughter. It's just tragic. But she endured. She kept going. And we bless her for her sacrifice. And we thank her. And we are ever so grateful that she came to our shores and left us with a legacy of people who are still alive today. And the line continues. And she is alive in both my viewer and my genealogical volunteer that I worked with, and also Madonna. So, you never know from, their impact on life. And so we are very grateful to Suzanne for what she did. So thank you, Suzanne. And thank you for my patrons and supporters and subscribers. I appreciate you all so very, very much. You've been with me, many of you from the very beginning. So thank you so much. And I look forward to completing this series. It's going to take a long time, but we are doing it one at a time. So this is episode 251. I've got about, I would say, a good 300 to go of real stories, and the rest. Remember that there are many, many filles du roi who did not have any descendants, did not get married. I will be featuring those, and I've never really talked about this, but I'll be featuring those on a separate episode, if you will, kind of grouping them all together to honor them as well and for making that journey. So with that being said, I want to thank you for watching this episode, and I will see you on episode 252 of Les Filles du Roi. Until then, au revoir.